Well, good morning, everyone. I think we're just approaching 10 o'clock. So if we could commence the meeting, and welcome to everyone. And it's a more pleasant day today. So in terms of the weather outside, so we'll we'll proceed by turning to Robert Close for apologies for absences, please, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Paul Skinner, Councillor Jane King and Mr Andrew Middleton. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are noted. Item 2, declarations, members of interest. Do I have any of those? Not at the moment. Thank you. So item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held in this chamber on the 9th of February. Could I have a proposer and seconder? Assume that everyone agrees with those. Thank you both. Thank you. Okay. And we then move on to the item 4, which was the external audit strategies for the county council accounts and the pension fund. Yeah, if we could bring in our colleagues. Hello to John and Sue. Hello to you both. So we're looking obviously at item 4, which is external audit strategies, and perhaps I could turn to John in the first instance. Oh, Sue, you're going to kick us off. That's right.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just do a brief introduction. This is the 2 external audit strategies covering the pension fund and the Lincolnshire County Council main accounts, and Mazars are here to present these to you and answer any questions you might have. I just wanted to mention the timescales for this year. This is covered in more detail in the next report, but it's worth noting here that the deadline for publishing the audited accounts has been extended to the 30th of November this year. And the auditors will be working towards reporting to you at the November committee. We still plan to present our unaudited accounts at the July committee, and we provisionally booked Ian Fifield to present a walkthrough of the accounts at that meeting to you. So that's all I wanted to say. So happy to hand over to Mazars.
Thank you, Sue. Can turn to John from Mazars, please. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the Lincolnshire Pension Fund, we've set out our audit strategy memorandum. With regard to the opinions that we give an opinion on the financial statements and also an opinion on the consistency between the financial statements and the information contained in the pension fund annual report. In terms of the timescales, as Sue has outlined, we're aiming to report for the end of November, which is the deadline for this year. And on page 24 of your pack, we've outlined the timescales for doing our work, and we'll be starting our field work on the financial statements audit in July. With regard to where we focus our work in relation to the valuation of investments within level 3 of the fair value hierarchy. That is to say, those that aren't quoted on a main exchange or whatever in terms of getting an accurate value. We will this year be taking account of the timing of any valuation work as well, to ensure that sort of any stock values affected by the Ukraine war have been considered in coming to the values that are being detailed in the final accounts. Other matters are outlined in our audit strategy memorandum in the usual way, including our commitment to independence and our mechanisms for communication. With regard to materiality, there are very large figures for materiality in relation to the pension fund because we're talking about very, very significant assets. So the overall materiality is just over 29 million. The performance materiality for our testing is just over 23 million, but we'll be reporting any sort of errors or misstatements or issues that we find over 800,000 back into this committee. And on that note, I would like to open up the audit strategy memorandum for the Lincolnshire Pension Fund for any questions that members may have.
Thank you, John. I'm just turning to...
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two questions, one of which is to do with resources. This is in terms of delivering to the 2 dates that we have for drafts and finals, because we didn't achieve that, I think, this year. There was 2 reasons, I think, behind that, one of which was resources and the difficulties in obtaining the right resources to actually do the work internally at Mazars. And I think the second one was some awkward topics within the valuations, property and things like that, which may well be even more difficult this time round if we're in a period of great volatility. So I'd like to hear Mazars' comments on those 2 questions and what they're doing to ensure that we do not have the problems we had last year and we do deliver to the timetables this year.
We've resourced up the pension fund audit appropriately to deliver to the timetable. With regard to the pension fund work last year, the work was largely complete by the deadline, but we had to wait for the work to be completed on the Lincolnshire County Council audit before we could report. So we didn't have too many problems on the pension fund side of the equation in terms of delivering last year, but we can't actually sign off the pension fund until we're signing off the overall statements in the one document. But suffice it to say, we have resourced up appropriately for this year, and Alex Campbell, who led the audit last year, is coming back to do part of the work together with the new team leader who is working on it. So we should have a good handover and we're geared up accordingly.
Well, the follow-up question is to do with asking the right questions at the right time to achieve deadlines, and understanding, I suppose, that internally at Lincolnshire, some questions do require quite a bit of work to actually deal with or provide the answer that you're requesting. So again, from a lessons learned perspective, will you be taking that into account this time round, so that as a whole, between yourselves and the audit team at Lincolnshire, will be able to meet the delivery dates?
Yes, we have a very good working relationship with Joe Ray and Claire Mackey and the team. They delivered the information that we required last year very well. We've got no problems in that regard. We've had reasonably sort of quick turnarounds. The only thing that delays our work on the pension fund is waiting for any values to come in from the investment fund managers if they're delayed after the end of the year. But that's a problem that Claire and the pension fund team face, as well as ourselves. But we have liaised closely with them, and we do not believe there'll be any problems.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't belay this point. I look forward to seeing this all happen in due course. Thank you very much.
I think if I could now hand over to my colleagues that work on the Lincolnshire County Council main audit, Chair and Sue, if that is all right from your perspective.
Thank you, and I'll work backwards because I'll pick up a couple of points from your questions there. I think it'd be helpful for you. So if I take more broadly context, we continue to invest in our resources to make sure that we are skilled up and scaled up to deliver the work. And we continue to do that with the resources in place to work to the timetable that's in the plan. Yes, we do lessons learned. We work what they're through, and I'll come on to some of the specifics about the county council audit in a moment when I talk you through the plan. There are a couple of things that I think could be a stickler this year, and those are things that are outside of our control, really. So it's the ongoing effect of the Ukraine crisis and what that may impact in terms of asset valuations at the year end, and how that may cascade through. That's not specific to Lincolnshire. That's something that the entire local authority role is going to have to deal with, and we can raise those questions, but it's still at this point a little bit too early to tell what the impact's going to be. Then if I talk about the audit plan itself, in terms of the County Council's audit plan, which is set out in the agenda, the first thing I point out is we continue to work on two halves. The financial statements work is set out to the same timetable of working to a November completion. The audit scope is consistent with the previous year. But if I take it to section 4 of our report, which talks about the significant risks and other key judgment areas around the financial statements, if I compare that to last year, the core fundamentals of where we will focus our work are consistent with last year, that being the non-rebuttable presumption of management overrider controls. That's something that's prevailing in every audit, where we'll be focusing around the authority's approach to accounting estimates, how the financial statements are pulled together, the use of journals to adjust the accounts. We'll continue to focus in two areas: the valuation of the pension fund liability being, subject to significant judgment. We'll discuss and liaise with the pension fund auditor to understand any pass-through implications of assets held through to the council. And of course, we will continue to have a look at the significant valuation of land, buildings and investment properties. And we will bring in our own expert to support our work in understanding the valuation process that goes through that. That's all booked in, planned to go. And we will work through that. There are some audit risks that were in last year's plan that aren't prevalent this year, and that's a reflection of time and improved understanding. So, for example, last year we included a specific risk around the accounting for COVID-19 grants. We included that for a number of reasons. One, it was a big number. Two, it was new, and both of those, whilst there's a continuing amount of grant income coming through, the complexity and the newness of it has moved on, and because there were no issues last year, we're able to essentially descale the financial reporting risk this year. The other area of work we do, section 5, is under the framework of value for money. That's the same as last year. Again, last year it was a new approach, a number of guidance coming out late that we needed to continually reflect on to ensure that we reported underneath the correct framework. There are no significant changes in that framework or the planned approach. That gives us greater consistency in order to deploy our resources effectively and work with the authority through any matters that arise. Our work is designed to identify if there's a risk of what we call a significant weakness in arrangements. We carry out that work. That risk assessment doesn't end until we get to issuing the final commentary. But at this point, there are no matters to bring to your attention. There are no matters arising that we would flag as something that affects your significant financial sustainability, your governance arrangements, or how you go about improving economy efficiency, effectiveness. That's not to say that the financial, the broader context of which you're working and the local context of which you're working isn't challenging, but the bar at which we set, significant weakness has not been met. I don't propose on going anything else through the report other than to reaffirm our independence and our ability to carry out your audit within the framework that we work. I'm happy again to take any questions specifically, or we can broaden it out further.
Thank you, Mark. I believe Ian would like to.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, am I right to pick up a question on the fees and audit at this point? Obviously we had the fee variations due to additional pieces of work done last year, and we have the scale fee. Can I just confirm the rates that we will be using if there are additional work elements being done? Because obviously, as you say, some of those are repetition points from that we have to do each year, but the scale fee hasn't caught up with them yet. How are those rates being priced? And if so, if there is a variation or change to the pricing, do we get to see that as well?
So the underlying rates are set underneath the PSAA framework. and it's based on a how much time it takes to do the work. We also, for your own assurance, we also look at consistency and benchmarking, so that any of these kind of built-in things that are become recurrent, where they're not built into the scale fee yet, a consistency applied, and absolutely not out of line with other areas. So that's about fair fees and assurance. Those rates, the underlying rates, I'm not going to commit to sharing them because I don't know what's permitted to share. But those rates won't change until the PSAA framework is retendered, which is ongoing at the moment.
So again, because when I look at effectively you had the scale fee, and effectively the cost to us was doubled last year because of the letters and the fee variation. I know there were specific one-off pieces of work, but there are actually repetition pieces of work in there. But as far as we're concerned, the actual cost per hour and the blend of skills was correct to complete that last year. We're not going to see an increase, so it's not, for example, on the fee variations, we're not going to see that go up to 9,000 this year, because actually the nature of the work is the same, the type of people are doing it the same, etc.
I'm gonna give you a caveat, a perfect auditor's caveat around this. So it is entirely based on what we face at the time. So we can give you our best estimate of work on, and I'll take the top line, pensions. We can give you our best estimate of how much. The way the contract works is it's how much time it takes our team to deliver, and whatever resource we put into that is what it takes. That's our best estimate as it is. It may take more than that, because we've just talked about I don't know whether there's going to be an impact of Ukraine. It's all on the assumption, and we do get good working papers from the council, but there will be other authorities we work with where we don't. So this is our best estimate up front, because I believe in being transparent rather than hitting you 18 months after we've done the audit going, by the way, this is what we would charge, we're going to charge. So I know that's not, you're trying to get me down.
As an auditor and accountant, I see a round number and I get very nervous. It's fine.
Thank you, Ian. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with fees again, and it's mainly possibly for Lucy rather than yourselves. Some of the fees in the pensions audit are to do with working with the external employers and getting their figures up to scratch, I suppose, so that we can actually use them. And there's obviously costs associated with your company doing that, but they are meant to be recharged back to the employers. Does that actually happen?
I can't answer that question, because that really is for maybe the people who actually operate the pension fund. But I know that we do recharge admitted authorities all costs as part of the delivery. But the detailed question, I can't answer that. Maybe Sue can. I don't know whether Sue's got more visibility on that. Sue Maycott.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Yes, certainly when additional work is done on pension fund, employers are charged. So we had that last year when asset valuations came in later, and we had to do additional work to see if our accounts needed to be changed, as did other employers. The charges were passed on in that instance.
That's fine, thank you. And the other thing I notice is that there is a typo in the pensions report where you don't refer necessarily to Lincolnshire County Council, but County Durham Council, I think it is, or Durham Council. And I hope that's going to be corrected before this document goes in public. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Mark and Ian. Just one from me. Regarding the valuation of the land and buildings under investment properties, obviously last year we had a specific problem with the battery and energy from waste plant and other issues. Could we have your assurance that if we that any requests for extra work from the county council finance team are actually requested in a sort of a to leave sufficient time for them to respond to you, so you can report by your deadline, Mark. Thank you.
Yes, is the very short answer. The energies for waste, absolutely, that was very complicated and tricky. In the calendar year 2021, there was some to and froing between us and the council's external valuers that was exacerbated through COVID because it was just, you know, from their side, a couple of people went off sick, so it just means 2 weeks turnaround, etc. And it's things like that that you won't necessarily see that in raising the query and then running it through, because it's never query and answer, unfortunately. But scale back and say, yes, the absolute critical thing that all of my team are told up front, as part of the planning work that we do and the on-site work, is tackle the big stuff first.
And just one further question. It's related to valuations, but in terms of more on the pension schemes side. Now, the Borders of Coast involvement, I mean, what reliance do we place on their valuation process in terms of preparing the pension fund accounts, and would that pose any challenges going forward?
I'm going to defer on that one because I don't audit your pension fund. So it might be one for probably more for Sue to pick up. Yeah.
Look into the Ukrainian situation. Obviously, you know, we go from one crisis to potentially a larger one. So again, I mean, obviously you said about demands on time from other authorities and everything as well. Obviously, what we're concerned about here is actually reporting at this county council. So do we have your assurance that in terms of the division of your time, you know, should problems arise, that we will have a fair share of your input, shall we say?
Absolutely. You will have that fair share. I mean, those broader aspects are really quite an unknown. That's the only thing I'll say. They are an unknown, and if it's a matter that is universal, then you will all be in the same boat, so to speak. I think the really tricky bit is unpicking the investments and understanding where they're at, and that will be everywhere. So we will treat Lincolnshire in exactly the same way as we would with any authority that's in that situation, so that we apply a consistent approach and we can, you know, get the right opinion issued to you.
Thank you, Mark, for the clarity on that. Thank you. Any further questions for Mark on this item? No, thank you. So are we all content with that? Okay, we'll do the recommendation. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. So we have that carried. Yes, okay. And then we move on to statement of accounts, please, on item 5.
That's me, thank you, Chair. This is the report we provide to you every year to give you an update on the regulatory framework that surrounds production of the annual accounts. The report covers changes to the Code of Practice, the accounts and audit regulations, our review of our accounting policies for both the main accounts and the pension fund accounts, the recent SIPFA consultation on changes to the code, and I've also included in Appendix C some recently published government guidance on measures to improve local audit delays. So the key points of the report are that there aren't actually many changes to the Code of Practice this year. In the last report, Mark Surridge referred to estimation uncertainty, and we've picked that up in the latest Code of Practice, that there's a real emphasis on appropriate disclosures around where we've made judgments about our estimates. And we're going to look to support our disclosure notes appropriately with regard to that. The SIPFA consultation referred to in paragraph 1.4, that's concluded and reported the results, which is that SIPFA proposed to delay the implementation of IFRS 16, the leasing standard, by 2 years to April 2024. That has to be approved by the Financial Reporting Advisory Board, so it's not confirmed as yet. In December 21, the government published guidance on measures to improve local audit delays, and that's shown in Appendix C. And in paragraph 1.8, we've set out the key points which may be of interest to members of the Audit Committee. Firstly, that there's increased funding coming to support the whole audit process. Also, strengthened guidance for audit committees to be published in April, and that will be followed by a consultation on the subject. Targeted training to be delivered through the Local Government Association. And finally, the amended deadlines that I referred to in the previous report, which is that the deadline for publishing audited accounts will be November this year, but for next year will revert back to September. And the deadline for publishing draft unaudited audited accounts will be July this year, but from next year will revert back to May. We are still going to be aiming to finish our accounts by the end of June so that they can come to Audit Committee in July. We have made some minor changes to our accounting policies, and these are shown in paragraph 1.11, and no changes to the pension fund accounting policies. So they're the main points, and happy to answer any questions on it.
Thank you, Sue. Perhaps before we go to questions, if I could ask you for forbearance just for a moment regarding paragraph 1.8, and Sue has just referred to the further funding for local bodies to help support costs to strengthen financial reporting from the Redmond review, and the additional guidance, and also targeted training for audit committees, etc. In that vein, I actually had an interview with the FRC the other day regarding the sort of our audit process and what more we could get out of that. So I can share that with members as and when required, and that was quite interesting. And also in terms of, I did the LJPSA survey as well, and put forward the committee's concerns regarding sort of the timing of the delivery of our audit reports, etc. We've discussed before, and Mark has alluded to as well, the problems that we had last year. So I went through that with the FRC and filled in the LGA PSA survey accordingly based on what we'd discussed at the committees earlier. And also last week we had the inaugural meeting of the East Midlands Audit Committee Chairs Forum, and that was really just to establish, again in conjunction with the LGA, to establish where we wanted to proceed in terms of training events and sharing best practice and those sort of issues. So that was hosted by North East Derbyshire Council, and it included the chairs. I think there were 16 of us in attendance from the East Midlands area. I think there could have been a potential of 35, so it was a mixture of all sorts of bodies. The chairman elected was Manjeet from Leicester, and we looked at the terms of reference, which we're going to have here available for members to consider, and we had a brief presentation by the LGA, and we looked into, I mean, basically, I think obviously we've got divergence of views because we had different types of authority there. One of the concerns with some of the audit committee chairman was training on financial systems, which they felt that some of them were rather weak on, which I don't think we I mean, I don't like to sort of blow our own trumpet, but I think we have good procedures to educate members, certainly on this committee on that, and there's plenty of opportunity for that in the council. But we mustn't be complacent, of course. And in terms of general members understanding financial systems and internal controls, etc., and governance, and so basically it's sort of looking at how the chairs locally can work together for in the future, and also provide training to our members as well. Okay, so I'll keep you abreast of developments on that. We're going to meet 3 times a year, and the next one is scheduled for the summer. So okay, so I will hand over to further questions on Sue's report. We're all happy with what Sue said? No, see. Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. On the pensions committee, there's quite a good deal of training that takes place, you know, particularly when there are changes planned in relation to how businesses carried out and delivered reported. And the LGA are fairly heavily involved in some aspects of that training as well. I hear your comments about us being perhaps in advance of some of our colleagues that are attending that meeting. Although it's sometimes very good, you know, to be formally in that position as well, or to be in a proven position, should we say, in relation to that. And it's always good, I think, to share best practice among our colleagues, because that way we'll all improve and all have more comfort that we're doing the job that we're meant to do on the audit committee.
Ian, before I bring you might be interested to know there was a divergence of views on independent members. And I
can
put
take the
forward the
hint,
case
it's
that
fine,
it was
yeah,
a
it's
very
fine.
good thing to have independent members, and our independent members were highly valued. So
Thank you. And I think that the challenge for me is that it'd be interesting to see what they say in terms of guidance. When you look at an audit committee, for me, in my experience, it has to be proportionate and in terms of strength and skills to actually, obviously, any business that you're managing. And as we hear, we know it's a lot easier to be an independent member on a county council that actually has got its stuff together and has got a good structure and everything else. If you've got a less strengthened business, that makes it harder to get the right people on the audit committee, because you're having to do a lot more extra work and it's a lot harder. So it'll be interesting to see what their view is on how we do share best practice, because a lot of it may not be applicable. So
that's what I took away from it. I think the obviously the needs of different types of authorities, like districts, counties, boroughs, can be quite diverse. What I did suggest is that, you know, going forward, we ought to be looking at things like financial resilience and value for money. But you've got to get the basics right first in terms of the membership of your audit committee and how confident they are handling that information, and the fact that I think for 1 or 2 chairmen there, that the audit committee was seen as a bit of a last resort for popping members in who weren't entirely keen to be on the committee, which is not where you want to be at all, of course. So that is quite an eye opener. So I'll keep you posted. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just reflecting on the discussion. In the past, we had a Lincolnshire Audit Committee forum that we met once or twice a year, and also you had your own training and development plan. I just wondered if that's something the committee would like us to consider sort of redoing and going forward, now that hopefully we're coming out of the 2 years of the pandemic, so that we can meet more face to face. So I'll be happy to take that forward if that's something the committee would value with the wider Lincolnshire district audit committees.
That would be very very good, Lucy, because I used to find the audit forum meetings we've had them at North Kay, haven't we, and 1 or 2 other venues, and they're really helpful. I mean, you get quite an insight, because obviously we're talking to members of health authorities and different organisations across the public sector as well. So in the police authorities, it's very interesting to know how those gel together and similarity of problems, etc. So yeah, if we could do that, and also look at our internal training plan again. Now we can meet in person, because Zoom training after an hour or an hour and a half can get quite hard.
I'll take that forward and bring something to our pre-briefing at the next committee for you to consider.
Very well. We shall So we're happy to accept the recommendations on item 5. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 6, internal audit progress report. Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the internal audit work delivered up to the 31st of December. It provides the committee with information around the outcome of the work completed, as well as progress and delivery around audit recommendations. So it sets out at high level. So just to pull out the key messages, at a high level, the assurances given, you can see, are quite positive. The work was high assurance and substantial assurance. The only area that we're drawing to your attention is around the Business World project. The report gives you some details of the high level of risks, but also just to give you the update that project and programme is got heavy oversight by the corporate leadership team in terms of rephrasing the plan and resetting the go live date. So the key things that have impacted that is around the data cleansing and also taking on board the audit committee's concerns around payroll parallel running. So that has taken a lot longer than anticipated, but the plan is being refreshed and with the date looking to be next year as identified in the plan, and that's going through the executive portfolio holders today, I believe. And Andrew's here if he wishes to give an update or more detail on that, if you have any questions. So the rest of the report provides you with some information around delivery and resources. As you can see, and we've reported previously, the challenges around building capacity and resilience remains a key issue, but also we've got plans in place that are being taken forward. These are taking a bit longer than anticipated to get mobilised, but they are in place, and I'm confident that we have the resources to deliver the plans that we've got in place. And I think the outstanding recommendations that I've brought out in the paper are just giving you the headlines of the high priority recommendations outstanding for low or limited. And again, on page 98 and 99, they bring them out in a bit more detail. But again, I think given the circumstances, there's been good progress around the implementation of recommendations by management. So in summary, the assurance framework, there's some positive assurances going forward. Projects and programmes are being given good oversight by the corporate leadership on the transformation programme, and good progress has been made with the recommendations. And whilst it's challenging on resources, there are actions in place to deliver the plans. Happy to answer any questions.
Mark.
Thank you, Jim. I'm pleased to hear your comment that you think you've got the resources that you need to deliver the plan, which is comforting, but resources are so much in demand. I'm sure you'll be keeping your eye on those, and particularly if you've got some retirements taking place, so that you do keep the resources available to do this important work. I've got two particular questions, or one's a statement rather than a question, I think. The business world development has been it appears frequently, should we say, in the report. Perhaps leave it best at that. I just wondered whether the delay associated with Business World has got any knock-on effects. You know, are the things that we're meant to be doing that are dependent on having a live Business World system that are being held up or are on the back burner or whatever they are? So that was one question. The second question is to do with ICT and cyber security and all that sort of thing, which might become an even bigger area of interest as time goes on. And, you know, the broad issues associated with the geopolitical situation start moving into this area even more than perhaps it has done in the past. So I just wondered whether, you know, we are giving as much importance to that as we need to, or even more importance, bearing in mind where it might go in the future. Those are the two questions.
Thank you, Councillor. So in relation to the business world on, the plan does document any interdependencies. So any of those would be assessed and risk assessed as part of that, and will be part of that rephrase plan. In individual dependencies and the impact of that, I'm not cited to. So maybe Andrew Cookham could maybe come into that to respond to that as he oversees that board. I don't know whether Andrew, have you got anything to add on that one?
Yes, thanks, Lucy. Good morning, members. Sorry, I can't be there in person today. Yeah, so in terms of the business world question, Councillor Allen, yeah, there are knock-on impacts. Clearly, with it being a finance and you know, an HR personnel system, there are subsequent efficiencies and transformation in those service areas. You know, as a result of go live, so they will be delayed. The most recent delay predominantly can be categorised as a result of an interdependent system that the supplier Unit 4 need to upgrade around cash receipting and the income management system. So very much sort of out of our hands in terms of the reason for it being delayed. So but naturally we're going through that replanning system process that Lucy referred to. I can add some comments on the cyber security as well, and I guess the answer to that one is a resounding yes. Very much aware and alive to the fact is that the geopolitical challenges that you talked about have increased and heightened the risk of cyber attacks. That's across the board. It's really heightened over the last couple of weeks. The fact is that there's been no noticeable cyber warfare so far as a result of what's been going on in the Ukraine. It is telling and very much a risk in the background. One particularly around our main focus internally has been around business continuity, ensuring that our business continuity plans are up to date and what have you. But I think it's acknowledged, you know, across the sector and across, you know, business government that there is a heightened risk of something occurring at some point as a result of that. Hopefully that's answered your question.
I think we have Ian would like to come in. Perhaps you have some questions you'd like to ask Andrew.
Please, Andrew. Morning, Andrew. It's probably a combination of words I'm seeing on here, and Andrew, you just said on there, there's a number of flags that are building. So we've got the statement around business world, around challenges in terms of resources in payroll and the systems teams. And as Councill's already mentioned, recruitment is a challenge at the moment. It's getting harder and it's more expensive. So you lose one, it's quite hard. We have system upgrades and move to Azure. And as you said, is we have that dependency on the other system that caused the knock on. So then I start thinking, well, there are other systems in the time we've got to update between now and when we go live that might also cause a dependency and therefore have issues that are outside our control. And therefore it goes on to one fundamental question, which said is we have a go live date on the 31st of March next year. In my time here, a business world has been mentioned every time and has continued to be every time. And I know when we've got such a massive project that's always the risk. It's that sort of flag after flag after flag that says, is the 31st of March a realistic delivery date? And having a wife who was on the payroll of a school when it didn't go so well, please get it right. Because I got it in the head quite a lot. So if we could come back to that fundamental question, 31st of March, the confidence around doing that, given all the dependencies we've mentioned so far.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and completely agree with all the issues that you talked about. I think that date that's in Lucy's paper is the date that we are replanning towards, rather than, if that makes sense. So that's what we're doing all of the work around at the moment.
So is aspirational target, or that say you're replanning to get to the 31st of March, so you're confident on that 31st of March, or is that at this point almost a top-down date rather than the bottom-up date?
It's a top-down date at the moment, and we're working through the planning process to get there. There's in terms of the components of what we need to do still to go live, there's still the residual or the last stage of the parallel payroll running, a final data cleanse, is what, you know, in terms of what Lucy's just been through. We then got to go through the process of replacing this income management system to a new system called Hey-Centric, because Unit 4 are dropping that. And I guess responding to one of the points you made about Azure, that's clearly one of the parts of the replanning process that we're going through. Income manager wouldn't have been an issue if we'd gone live, or we're in the process of going live sort of 3 months prior to now, if that makes sense, because it's come into play as a result of the delay. So part of the replanning process is a full sort of assessment of all of those feeder systems that come into Business World, just to make sure that over the next 12-month period, that there's nothing else that might come into play that might require some remedial action. And I guess the other bit in the background is we're having to maintain the version updates of where we're at with the Business World program, and there's a big version upgrade to be done over this next 12 months. So that's part of that 1st of April date for next year as well, in terms of managing the transition from one version to another of Business World, in terms of going live as well, and all the regression testing that goes with that.
Yep. Chair, I may be stitching myself up at this point. Would it be helpful if I actually spent a little bit of time, from my perspective, for the committee's perspective, working with Andrew, just to have a little bit more detail, and working with Lucy as well, just to have a look at the regression testing and implementation plan? Because my panic with these sorts of things, not so much panic, my concerns, having got it wrong and hopefully got it right a few times as well, it's that date becomes very, very an albatross around your neck if you're not careful, and making sure that we've got suitable contingency. Say regression testing, if you're switching systems, is a nightmare, because you're doing everything at the same time, and a lot of things can happen, as we said, between now and then. So would it be all right if I just offline had a quick chat with people, just to have a little bit more familiarity? Would that be okay? I realise I'm volunteering myself to do more work, but
Andrew, would you be happy with that? And Ian can report to the rest of the committee.
Absolutely, more than happy with that. It's part of this whole, control and governance framework. So more than happy with that. And I think, I guess, just to re-emphasise, the reason why we're taking this belt and braces approach is to precisely avoid some of the challenges that we've had in the past around, clearly ensuring that we pay the right people at the right time, the right amount, etc. is at the utmost importance to us. So, but yeah, absolutely happy to speak to you offline about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Andrew, for that offer. Mark.
A second bite of the cherry, I'm afraid. I'm really backing up what Ian's just said, and indeed suggested. I think we really do need a date to work towards. There's no question about that, because this topic has appeared time and time again on our papers. I do understand the importance of having a date with a system that everybody has confidence in, that works. And it's pointless having a date if we do then go live and find all sorts of issues associated with the operation of the system. But there again, it has been going on a long time. We're talking about a year's 12 months time, if it's March 2023. It really, and there must be an awful lot of effort going into developing the system and running the current system as well, which is not good practice really, particularly when resources are stretched or are scarce. I do think we do need a date, but we do need to work very, very confidently towards that date to ensure that we have a system then that does the business. But we really need to bring this to a conclusion, and if that's the way to do it, that's the way to do it. And if Ian can help, that would be very good. It's certainly, help us understand the issues.
Thank you, Mark. Do you want to come back in? No.
To say, sorry, you're happy to do so. And I think, like I say, it's sometimes a date helps, but the thing is, what you don't want is it's the third iteration of a date. We have the same issue when we get internal audit actions, and you see it's rolled and the credibility thing is there. But say, as long as it's realistic. Unfortunately, you guys operate in a world of zero risk in the loosest possible senses. It has to be right, because you're the first to get it when it doesn't.
I think, Ian, from previous experience with the payroll is extremely complicated at the County Council because of the complexities of different employment practices and different types of employment. it's far more complicated than you may far more complicated ever imagine from a cursory view from afar. Stephen, please, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick one. I'm glad to hear that we're confident that we've got plans for taking on the extra work for North Kesteven, but it does occur to me where we have got resource pressures on resources and so on, and concerns whether people might be coming back or whatever, that to be carrying on taking extra work does seem to be difficult or odd, but especially when we're doing a good job, we don't want it to deteriorate. And I just hope that we can keep an eye on that and have that assurance that that progress is being made and that we're not actually losing out by taking on that extra work.
Lucy, would you like to?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I don't underestimate the short-term challenges, but what we have got is commitment through the Executive Director Andrew is to backfill through buying in some external resources. So there is that short-term temporary, and we are actually going out for recruitment and growing our own, but it's acknowledging that these take some time to get those experienced staff in post, which is our preferred option. So so we do offer operate a co-source model. We have more external trusted suppliers working with us at the moment than we would normally, because we're building and recruiting and over recruiting our posts. So I'm confident that we balance the books to deliver all our commitments, but obviously that's based on intelligence and information that we've known. And what I've done is shared a bit of a forward look with some of that, so that the committee gets that transparent insight of some of the challenges we're facing. So I think short term it's going to be a challenge, but long term it's about that long term collaboration with the wider Lincolnshire districts.
Thank you, Lucy. Are we, I mean, in terms of implementing Office 365, is that proving, is it proving difficult at the moment to roll that out across the board, Andrew, or is it, what pressures have we got there, and do we think we're going to do that on a timely basis?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I think the project in terms of the plumbing is broadly there. I think the main thing now is the change and the maximisation of the benefits that come from that suite of work, really, in terms of how everybody uses it in a consistent way, and to maximise its usage. I know one of the things that we've talked about with members was around the business support review, and the 50% reduction in personal assistant support staff, really, I guess, to coin the phrase, and how we maximise the kit that we've got now to make that a lot more slicker, and that will happen across the piece as we go through. The service have rolled out some individual user experience maximisation tools as well to sort of help that process. But I think that it does still require more work in terms of the organisational change that goes with it, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think there was just one further thing I was going to allude to, which was the working together with audit committees and scrutiny committees. Actually, Mark and I have been in a meeting, aren't we? We did have a meeting with Rob Parker and Tom Smith, wasn't it, a little while ago, regarding working with OMBS, and we're actually having a meeting with the leader following from this committee to sort of talk through that as well. Okay. So any further points members would wish to make? No? Okay, thank you. So we thank you for all our contributors. So we have the recommendation, which I have is eluding me at the moment. If you just bear with me a moment. Okay. So we are recommending that the outcome of the internal audit report and assurance is given and identifying the actions that need to be taken, which I think we've covered, and the progress and delivery of the internal audit plan. So do I have a proposal second for those? All those in favour? So if we could now move on to item 7, which is the risk management progress report. And we will have got Debbie. Hello, Debbie.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I would like to present the committee with the Risk Management Progress Report and take it as read, but I just want to highlight the key messages. As explained on page 131 of the Progress Report, we continue to progress actions from the Governance Review, which include the regular reporting of red risks and issues to CLT, and continue to regularly meet with directorate and corporate risk and safety groups, ensuring that key themes and messages are discussed across the directorates. With respect to the strategic risks on pages 132 to 135 of the progress report, there continues to be a good level of assurance over the risks. You can find further detail of these risks on pages 137 to 140 in the form of the risk register. There have been some new risks included, namely risk 11, outstanding debt, and risk 12, exit of Serco contract. Other risks to note that we have some movement on are safeguarding children, which is back to being substantial assurance. Ability to recruit and retain staff in high areas has moved to limited assurance due to issues around recruitment. And IT infrastructure has also moved to limited assurance due to several factors, including staff shortages within IT and some issues with migration. We continue to liaise with managers and executive directors to gain assurances that the risks are being managed. This is with regular one-to-one updates with risk owners and supporting managers. On page 136 and looking forward, we have a number of areas that we're looking to implement and work on over the coming months, and we shall continue to provide an update of activities within our next report in September 2022. Overall, the Council's strategic risks continue to be managed proactively. There is a good level of awareness of the current and emerging issues, with positive action being taken where appropriate. Our recommendation is that the committee notes the current status of the strategic risks facing the council and make recommendations on any further scrutiny required. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Steve.
Thank you. Page 135 with your IT infrastructure, I can understand that you've moved it down to limited assurance, and then it says with an improving direction of travel. I'm a bit confused about that. I can see that if we're going backwards or down, that we might have a deteriorating or a static direction of travel, but improving, I'm not so sure, though I do read lower down that you're hoping that these things are being addressed, but at the moment I'm not too sure whether that particular distinction's right, or was it just a typo?
Thank you. You're quite right. Normally when we're looking at these things, limited assurance could possibly mean that it's static or deteriorating. In this case, I've put improving direction of travel. I think the reason behind this, and I did speak to the risk owner and the head of service, was that there has been new cloud platforms that have now been implemented. So there is improvements continuously on that area. So even though the risk itself, the assurance level is limited, there has been some improvement in the whole IT area. So I think that's why they gave it improving direction of travel. But it is one that I'm watching, and hopefully we'll be back to substantial assurance over the coming months once there's some issue, the issues with staff shortages and that the equipment, which is a national thing, is implemented, and the migration continues to hopefully be more successful. So I think that's the reason behind that. Thank you.
Could I come back on that, please?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, certainly. I understand that we've got new equipment, but I mean, obviously this was being dealt for, I think, the end of December. I don't know when the new cloud platforms came in, but we should be taking it as of that date. My concern would be if it's something new, it hasn't had time to embed in, quite right to bring it up in the text, but I think to describe it myself as improving direction of travel at that stage could be a bit ambitious. I would prefer myself to see it static or just left out altogether. And then next time round, you could probably see it. But it seems to me a little bit sitting on the fence. Oh, well, yes, well, we hope it's going to be all right. We're going to bounce straight back up. And that to me doesn't really give the true picture. I can understand the sentiment behind it, but I think in terms of recording, I would rather see it not there myself personally.
Okay, thank you. I think, Andrew, did you want to come in for me?
Yeah, if that's okay, Chairman, please. Yeah, I just add to what Debbie said, and I guess just to further emphasise why it's an improving direction. Obviously, there's multiple facets to these sort of risks, and one of them, so particularly on the infrastructure side of things, is the number of legacy systems that we've got that are on older sort of platforms such as Windows 2003, Windows 2008, and there's a big sort of plan and sort of implementation in the background of removing those systems off and putting them on those newer cloud-based technologies that Debbie talked about. So this time last year we were in a position where there was I think you're talking about significant percentage improvements based on this historical technical debt, as John Wickens, the Assistant Director for IT, would call it, and we're working through that and making them on these safer and more efficient cloud-based technologies. So that's why I think it's been classed by the service as an improving picture. Thank you.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Andrew. Mark, and then Ian, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with the summary charts that we've got on pages 137 to 141, I think it is. I can get it right. Or 140. We have a target score, and we have a current score, and we have then a comment about where we are in relation to the item, in relation to the assurance and the direction of travel. The current risk, though, is just as it presumably comes from the latest review, and what he said at that latest review in relation to it. It doesn't really give us a great deal of information about what changes taking place in terms of the assessment of the risk. I just wondered whether we need something that says this is what it was at the previous reporting period, and this is what it is now, so that we can actually see what changes are taking place and whether those do match the comments that we've got in the other columns.
Thank you. I have tried to, in the paper, but obviously it's not as clear as you would like, put down on pages 133 to 135 where there has been movement. I have put where it was previously, but maybe this isn't as clear as you would like. I can do a summary page, which I think we did many years ago, of where it was previously and where it's moved to, if that would help members.
Yes, I think
Yes, it would. It's just an extra
nod of heads, Debbie. So I think that would be helpful if we could ask
Yeah.
you that. We would very much appreciate that. Thank you so much.
That's fine. Thank you.
Hi, Debbie, it's Ian. The one it's coming out as the theme through a lot of today is staffing and recruitment and resource, and we have it both with Mazars, ours internally, internal audit, whatever. My concern is the visibility and our ability to react, because we're saying there's a lot of, as we know, a lot of pressures about people leaving, a lot of people about pressures around skills being shortages and then being held on to. Our ability to do things like golden handcuffs to keep people in positions is limited as a county council. And then we were seeing a lot of inability to actually bring the right talent back in to backfill when we need to. From a specific area by area perspective, are we comfortable that the business can and the council can understand where its high risk folks are, how vulnerable they are, how easy it is to replace? Because again, it's where it says is addressed by several initiatives. That sounds great, but actually specifically what is it and which ones will still be left vulnerable? So it's just going to take time. And again, that's an increasing risk perspective, and we're going to be left with actual realizations if it crystallizes from a risk into an issue. And then once it snowballs, it starts to get painful. Sorry, Lucy.
Bring in Lucy, Ian, please.
I think I'll respond from a practical point of view, as obviously one of the challenges within my service. So in terms of that general comment on the risk register, the council has recently approved a new policy around attraction and retention to look at how we can widen the scope for the things that we can utilise to do that. So that does include retention supplements and different ways of actually attracting people within the terms and conditions role. So that came out and it has been launched this month, and CLT has approved that. In addition to our normal sort of performance information, we get regular HR information through data collection through the relevant systems, and each DLT has regular monthly updates on starters, leavers, changes, and it is a very much a monthly discussion around those hard to recruit. So it is on everybody's agenda. I think the thing with the county council, it's a varied and complex organisation, so it has been cited and it has been reported to CLT. So I think Andrew could also come in what sort of governance and oversight from CLT, but on an operational point of view, it's definitely being supported through change of policy and obviously good management information. So I don't know whether Andrew wanted to add anything. I don't know whether that helps, Ian.
Yeah, I'll have a couple of questions after that one in a second. Andrew's come back in.
Yes, if I may, Chair. So yeah, we're having monthly reporting on this at CLT as well, to supplement the DLT reports that Lucy referred to. We've come quite a long way over the past year, particularly since Tony Kavanagh, our AD for HR, has been here in terms of management information around HR. And I guess one of the things, whether this provides reassurance or not to the committee, I'm not sure, but clearly over a rolling period of a year, our numbers on roll of staff are broadly the same. There are particular challenges within periods of time which we're trying to refer to as the fill rates. This is getting the right person in at the right time, first time, and that isn't always the case. I think that the recruitment market out there is really, really challenging. Clearly, there are people who live in Lincolnshire now who can get jobs anywhere in the country, and that's indeed that's some of the people that we've lost at high rates of salary, what have you. So as Lucy said, the attraction and retention work that we've been discussing corporately is designed to address that, and will come into effect over a period of time. We report regularly on those issues to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board as a performance type issue. Clearly, we'll continue to report the risk matters here and the risks that it presents to those charged with governance. But yeah, very much top agenda item really in CLT at the moment in terms of ensuring that we've got that fit for the future workforce and one that's delivering on all of our priorities. So happy to answer any follow-ups that there may be on that.
Thank you both. I think the MI is helpful, but I always pointed out it's always helpful to know that the horse has bolted. But in terms of, again, the effectiveness of the policies, understanding how we're going to demonstrate that they're working. And as you say, Andrew, the game's changed in terms of our resources, and we've got some fantastic people on the council, and some of them are actually snaffled rather than actually they walk out, and that's again a challenge for us as well. So I think I'm pleased to hear that it is top of the agenda for the CLT. I'm pleased to hear that obviously I knew we'd be taking it seriously anyway. I think the question is that knowing what levers we can pull and which ones we're just having to accept the risk on, rather than trying that you can actually fully mitigate it. I think that visibility, as long as it's visible to the executive and at the right level, then that's fine. But I think it's only going to get worse, I think, for the next year or so before it starts to settle down again.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it did start off with the resource issue, right at the beginning of this meeting, because I have the same concerns that have been raised by Ian. The difficulty is if you haven't got the people out there in the marketplace, you can have all sorts of processes and policies to actually address the issue, but if they don't exist, it's very difficult to bring them into the organisation. And I have made very similar comments in relation to the Health Scrutiny Committee, where the NHS is in exactly the same sort of position. And they are also bringing in apprentices, just as we're bringing in apprentices, as a way of trying to address the issue, with the understanding that those people are local and may well stay local. Although I would say that once they've done their apprenticeship, they become, you know, open to market conditions, and presumably will move, if the money is right, outside Lincolnshire, even if they may not want to do so. But you know, that's what happens, I'm afraid. I just wonder whether it's as we said at Health Scrutiny, it's a bigger issue than one solely for the Lincolnshire NHS or Lincolnshire County Council. Is it something that needs raising, you know, across the bigger area of local government, in terms of where the shortages are and how you go about delivering those shortages across the country, with a pool then that's available to yourselves, which you may be able to call upon because other people are calling upon their same pools, or whether we do need to do things like you know, look at promoting positions in the universities, you know, sponsor actual vacancies in the universities, you know, for people to go into the profession and to graduate in those sorts of areas, as a way of increasing the actual pool size. I can remember when I started off as an engineer, local government had a national engineering training programme, and it was undertaken by all the local authorities, on the basis then that there was enough for everybody, even if some of the people did move around, you know, different local authorities. And it does seem as though we do look at things in an isolated area, on an isolated area basis, nowadays, just as the NHS does, because it's not national, you know, it's very localized as well. And consequently, you know, we are rarely likely to solve the problem if we do look at it like that, because if we do train people, people will move, and you know, there isn't necessarily people elsewhere who are prepared to move to us.
Thank you, Mark, for those insights. I'd agree.
Sorry, Chairman, the question was, are we looking at, you know, talking nationally, or are we looking at actually beyond apprenticeships, you know, in other words, working with universities locally to actually sponsor positions and things like that?
I know internal audit have approached
we have, and
university. I mean, I don't know how broad that is across the spectrum, Lucy. I mean, Andrew probably answer that for us.
Yeah, if that's okay, Chairman. Yeah, so that working with the university and other sort of local education providers is part of that attraction and retention strategy. We're clearly leaving it to, or working with HR, or working with services to sort of work out what the best approach is for the individual areas, because each profession within the council, they're all different, clearly very different professions. Going back to Councillor Allen's comment about national initiatives, it's a national discussion piece with the LGA in particular, in terms of addressing workforce challenges. The government put a lot of money into obviously workforce pressures within, particularly within the care sector, for example, recently, with a view to coming up with sort of broader, you know, pan local government boundary solutions, I guess. And you know, yeah, I guess you're right. I as somebody who did their training in the North Yorkshire region, there were schemes that went beyond council boundaries as well. So I think it's definitely something that is worth looking at. But I guess the council's in a position at the moment, in terms of apprenticeships, graduates, what have you, where, you know, after 10 years of the austerity era, where things like graduate training programs were paused, halted, for example, there's a matter of bringing those back on that will give the medium-term solution to some challenges, and supplemented by the short-term response around things like supplements and what have you, to attract sort of ready-made employees now, if that makes sense. So it's that sort of mixed economy that will get the sector through this, I think, would be my response.
Thank you, Andrew, for for commenting on this. It's a thorny topic for not only us, but as everybody has said, for a large number of organisations. Just one question to Debbie for myself. In terms of the, obviously we've got the care white paper issued, and members had a training session with Glenn Goward on that last week, which is some of it can be potentially quite concerning, I think, but we go, you know, that is going to be the national system. So those risks that poses and the funding formulas to the county council could be a new and could be quite large. In terms of that, Debbie, I know that's been escalated for some time now, hasn't it, to the corporate management and leadership team. And I just wondered what we were looking there with that, and on top of that, inflationary pressures as well, because as we discovered at our training the other day, there's no inflation supplement on the figures that are coming out of central government at all. I mean, I think they've forgotten about that, or weren't going to mention it, perhaps, I don't know. So I don't know whether you could help us on that, or perhaps Andrew could. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. To be perfectly honest, with respect to the care white paper, I don't know the ins and outs of it as well as you do, with having some training on it. However, as you're aware, this is a live document, and we continuously not look for new risks, but we identify any risks that need to be included within the strategic risk register. This is one that I can go back to Andrew and say, does it need putting onto the strategic risk as a strategic risk at the next update? So again, it's a live document. It's always evolving. As you can tell from this one, there's been 2 new risks, and we continue to try and update it as and when. And if this is one that we feel that Glenn feels it should be a strategic risk, then we'll pick that up at the next round of updates.
Before Andrew comes in, the training that Glenn gave was very good, wasn't it? It was probably took the full couple of hours, I think, but it was, I mean, as a broader suggestion, perhaps, I mean, for Debbie's team, it would really point out, you know, where the key areas are likely to be.
It was very honest.
Do you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two points on that. So clearly, Glenn is putting a wraparound transformation project to deliver those reforms. It's predominantly through the finance function, but the results of it been a lot of it to do with fees and what have you. And as part of that process, with Debbie's support, there'll be a ramping up of the risk management arrangements around that, as we would do with any other project governance. So that will be coming. And to your question, Chairman, around inflation, the government were pretty clear in September when they announced the changes. Inflation and demand are the responsibility of the council, and therefore the local taxpayer. So it'll have to form part of our future budget setting assumptions when we update the medium-term plan each and every year, don't we? And I guess as part of those debates, we'll actually have to have going forward.
That was the concerning thing, that, you know, it's going to fall, as Glenn made crystal clear, it's going to fall on us and other local authorities, and it's going to be a difficult one to predict in the current environment, and also you're making sure that the systems are very robust to make sure we keep the outstanding debt to an absolute minimum. So Mark, sorry. Oh, Lucy, I do.
No, don't worry.
And
just
pointing out Mark.
Just to add to Andrew's and Debbie's feedback, this report went to CLT, and one of the discussions was around inflationary pressures, and it was agreed that that would be a separate risk going forward. So there'll be some work to identify the full extent on that. So that is definitely coming up as a separate risk, which I did obviously will feed back into the system. So yes, you're absolutely right. It has been sort of assessed as a significant issue for the council.
Thank you, Lucy. Any further questions from members? No? That's, thank you to Debbie and Andrew. I'm sorry we've putting you both on the spot, but it's obviously very important that we identify these issues at an early stage. Okay, so we have the recommendations that we're noting the status of the strategic risks, and I think we've debated about the make recommendation on the future scrutiny, which is really on the as we've said, looking at the adult social care situation per se, as well as other matters of staffing. So do I have a proposal and second of those recommendations? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, so if we can then move on, please, to the next item, which is our counter forward plan. Item 8. I'll turn to Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman. So this sets out for the committee, giving you an opportunity to comment on the planned work for 22-23. It's a response to the Council's tough stance on counter fraud. It's a proportionate and pragmatic plan, focusing on some of the key risks set out in the risk assessment, counter fraud risk assessment. We have a small team within the council, but it's an effective team, and it sets out the plan in the attachment. Appendix A sets out the key areas that we're focusing on, and that's in line with best practice. So there's a key area of around policies, raising awareness, identifying risk. There's some proactive work which will be working with our internal audit team around such things like contract, fraud risk, etc. And also there's some time in the plan to respond to any fraud investigations. So I think I just take that paper as read and be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Lucy. Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Lucy, just a quick one. It's when I look at the plan, I mean, the team do a great job. We've said it many times. It's fantastic. I think the bit that I'm probably just missing on the paper, I'm happy to pick up this separately, is that insight about what are we seeing and what are we in terms of active current work now, and also where do we see the direction of travel in terms of where they see the vulnerabilities. We've mentioned, for example, cyber and a few other elements on here, and it's just a case of that insight, because they're best placed better than me to tell me about where do we think it's going to be going, or where are hotspots, or where are concerns. Tie back to our topic of the day, resources, for example. Do we think that we haven't got resources and certain skill sets based on where we're seeing the traffic going?
So as part of the counter fraud work plan is the update of the fraud risk register. So that comes to the committee in September. So that gives you the insight of our key vulnerabilities. It's an exempt paper and it will give you that horizon scanning. So that will also give you that insight of where we're doing. And obviously the proactive work is based on that fraud risk assessment. So that's updated. It wasn't updated this year, but it still pretty much remains the key areas, which is around contracts, social care, those kind of things. So you do get that insight.
I think my concern is more of timing, because I think if we're getting the update in September and we're talking about resourcing, we're talking about trying to react to that and getting approval. I suppose it's just that bit of saying is we've redone the risk register. Are there any themes coming out now, and are we? I suppose it's just the imperative and the speed. I think that it may be the nature of this committee, but it may be just a case of saying is that if you're getting to September and that's the plan and this is what we're trying to do, if there's a resource pressure and anything else, we're then a little bit behind the curve.
Sorry if I didn't make myself clear. This plan is risk based on and formed on the intelligence of the risk register. We refresh it again, right, and then it's brought to you for information and insight. But that fraud risk register is the sort of genesis of this plan for the proactive work.
Fine.
So sorry if I didn't make that
clear. No,
that's
me not understanding more than anything else. So from the resourcing point of view, is there any area in the fraud team or that we have that resourcing gap that we're seeing at the moment compared to some of these risks that we're seeing coming through?
We have a small team, so we do with what we can with the resources we have. So
could I flip the question?
So that is basically So there's always more that you can do on counter fraud. So, and it depends on the actual investigations. So that's why we monitor the resources against the planned work, and that's why we sort of put that big chunk of a contingency and also investigation, so that it has less impact on the planned work of the work. So this year our focus is again raising awareness, doing the survey, and again making sure people are aware of the whistleblowing policies, how you should, if you have any concerns, how they should be raised. So again, what we tend to do when that happens, there tends to be a bit of a spike in investigations and reporting. So we do that cycle. So I think we have a finite level of resources, and we make the best use of those resources, but we could always do with more resources.
That's kind of why I'm trying to flip the question, because this is coming from a support point of view rather than the challenge point of view. Is my question is if you had one more person of a certain thing, what else could we tackle? So whilst we're utilising the resources well, the answer is if we had extra, what would we do differently? Because again, that's the thing for me when we're contexting this plan, is if we've got this and we're reusing, okay, if we had something else, what would be the proposal and why? Because I think for me, the audit committee is also there to support these initiatives, to go back out to the executive to say, look, where are the areas that we're not quite driving as hard on? And whilst we're doing a great job of what we've got, what else could we do?
So as your head of internal audit, what I'm looking to do is work smarter with the combined use of resources of the internal audit team and the counter fraud team to be proactive on like the contract management and things like that with the resources that we've got. I think the reality is that there is a finite level of resources. Some councils don't have a separate resourcing team. So I'm comfortable that we've got sufficient resources to deliver the plan. It would be nice to have more, but I'm not sure that's a realistic picture at the moment. I don't know whether that, you know.
I don't want you to feel that you have to say, look, and I know there's constant pressures and costs and everything else, but I think is, you know, from our very narrow view, for me, is a case of going back out and challenges and say, I don't think nobody here is challenging on the, are we utilising the best way, and your challenge is to get more out of less. But for me, the question is actually, are we missing something because there is a pressure? And that becomes a different conversation for resourcing and Andrew to pick up to say, right. And that's, for me, is our duty as an audit committee to challenge that.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify because there's limited benchmarking information out there on the counter fraud team, because that's been asked by this committee on numerous occasions, because there is such a mixed economy out there, different levels of resources within different teams, and fraud is very hard to benchmark. So we do our best, and there is a sit for benchmarking that gives you some indication, but it's not an absolute easy response to give you that. But we could always do more, Andrew, with more resources. So and we do put those bids in when we go through the budget process.
Thank you, Lucy. I know you've bited your corner very well. So
I'm trying to give her more resources. She's telling me no. It's
rather like being like Oliver Twist. No, but you know, we would always like more resources in the fraud, in counter fraud. But I think our team, in view of the size, do a stalwart job, or they have done in terms of investigating these issues. And of course, there's always going to be one issue that you don't know is in existence at the moment, and I'll come out later on. Okay, thank you. So, any further questions? No. We have got the plan, and the recommendation is to review and approve it. So, do I have a proposer and seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So, if we could move on and then to the internal audit plan at item 9, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the internal audit risk-based plan. It's been formed based on intelligence gathering, the risk information within the council, as well as the assurance framework and discussions with the relevant services. So it sets out the areas that we're going to look at and the activities for the first 6 months from April to September, and a call-off list for areas for the remainder of the year. It gives you an opportunity to look at the planned areas, making sure that you're comfortable with the priorities we've established, that they make sense with the information that you've looked at. I've given you, obviously, we have a 23 staff full-time equivalents within the established within the team, and they're sort of broadly between 50, generally 50% between the county council's delivery and our external support for mainly Lincolnshire districts and academies. And again, it sets out a bit more detail around that. I've also attached the charter, which gives you information around our purpose, authority and responsibility in terms of that third line of assurance within the council's framework. So overall, the corporate leadership is accountable for the governance, risk and control environment, but we, as well as yourselves, play a key and vital role to make sure that that's working effectively, and we help contribute to the overall success of the council and our external clients. So I have set out a bit more information around our resources, and I think picking up on that, which I didn't mention, some of our workforce strategy is around growing our own. That is the longer term function of getting those skills and working with the finance team around work experience placements, graduates, working with university and apprenticeships. So over the longer term, we get those skilled people, and showcasing both local government and finance and internal audit as a great career to work in, and also giving you that, again, that assurance that in the short term we've got that commitment to work with that transition and some external suppliers to help smooth that process. So again, as Andrew said, it's a bit of a mixed economy of short term to keep and retain the people we have, but longer term grow and build the skills. And why working for Lincolnshire? I've worked for Lincolnshire nearly 36 years. There's a reason for that. It's a good employer, and we just need to showcase that. I started my career as an apprenticeship, and it supported that. Andrew's worked as a graduate, so there's very mixed way of working within the public sector. And I think, you know, that it's going to get tough out there, but public sector is a good profession, and it's just marketing that a bit more actively against our competitors, the external auditors. Anyway, I think that's the paper presented for any questions, and the appendices gives you the details. And I've also put in the must-dos. So if those are the ones that are really key to the success of the council and my opinion for next year.
Thank you, Lucy. Ian, Mark, yeah, Ian and then Mark.
Thank you, Lucy. And again, you know, scanning the plan, standing back, it looks eminently sensible. I think it's definitely the right blend of everything we need to be doing. Just probably a very thick question on page 169, page 9 of my report. Three of the entries haven't got your internal audit risk assessment. The percentages in there and the assurance map ratings, are they new, typo, missing, or being thick?
They haven't been assessed, but there are areas that are of interest. So the movers and starters, for example, has come up within the external audit. So it might not be something that's big enough to be assessed in our audit sort of activities, but it's of interest in as an individual item that's come up in the past. And we feel that we want to follow that up.
So does that include the same for the asset management and physical and security and all of those, basically, if they don't have a score? Are they like to get a score at some point, or are they just going to sit there? I think they're sensible, completely sensible, but are they likely to be scored, just so I know?
If they are significant to be part of the assurance map in their own right, they will be scored and assessed through both our risk assessment, but also through the assurance mapping, which is the accountable manager assessing how the level of risk and comfort that they have over that activity. Okay. So at the moment, at the time of writing, those weren't there, but we are going to, because we still have free and unfettered access across any activity. So we brought those in.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree that the plan is a very good one and a very good basis for what we need going forward over the next forthcoming year. The only thing that I think we need is to ensure that we do deliver it in terms of having all the resources that we need to do so at the right time and speed, of course. I'm going to go back to resources because I do see this as a real issue. I started in local government a lot longer than 36 years ago. because I started in 1972. And it did, and that was after graduating. It did seem at the time that I did it, and indeed, well, when I was at university, that the university courses seemed to be targeted at producing the skills and resources that the country needed as a whole. And I think there's a real issue at the moment in terms of the universities providing courses and skills that attract students, irrespective of really where they see their living coming in the future. And that's why I did say, you know, are we talking to the universities locally and even nationally about providing the skills as actually required, rather than providing courses that are attractive to students, no matter what their backgrounds are. Because if it's a question of doing a graduate course that delivers a very good audit person, or that produces somebody that knows the ins and outs of the film industry between 1928 and 1932, they're probably going to take the film industry one, as opposed to what they would see as a very boring course dealing with auditing skills, although that's probably one where it delivers them a career that actually earns some money and allows them to actually live into the future. So that's, I don't really expect a response, Lucy. I think that's just my jaundiced view of life.
I think, just to reiterate what Mark has said, I mean, I've did an accountancy degree, but I did it at a polytechnic. I didn't do it at a university. And we were taught by people who had worked in industry and practice. We had a lot of our tutors came from Boots in Nottingham on a subcontract basis and things like that. And you were taught by people who were doing it, had a more practical viewpoint, rather than using it as an academic, more of an academic pursuit. And maybe I'm being old-fashioned, but I think that it gave us that insight and skills that you could then go on, and it was a sandwich course, and you could test out actually with an employer. So, but I'm probably just a dinosaur.
I think for us, whilst the professional training, we can do that. It's the attributes and the sort of common sense and that professional curiosity and some of the wider skills that you can pick up from not necessarily an accountancy qualification. Some of those skills, we're looking for the IT, data analytics is coming in, forensic looking. So the world is moving on. So whilst we can train people to be auditors, it's the actual critical analysis, that professional curiosity, some of those softer skills that are harder and they can come through. And if you can do that through the graduate apprenticeship, because they also do that, they do level 7 apprenticeships, which is the higher level degree sort of apprenticeship. So again, we're looking into all aspects. The new policy does give you those things that you can work with HR to try and do whatever you need to do to get those skills within your team.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Ian, Mark, everyone. Thank you. So we have the internal audit plan for 22-23 before us, which we've accordingly discussed. So are we agreed that we're going to approve that? Thank you. Yes. So regarding the work programme, Lucy, can I turn to you on that one, please?
Yeah, apologies, that wasn't completed for this committee, so I'll bring it to the next committee fully updated.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we had the things diarised in at the last committee, which was only in February, so that would just add some of our suggestions here to that. Okay, so I think we have concluded quite ahead of time today, which is unusual for this committee, but it just shows we've been succinct and to the point, I think, today. So thank you to everyone, and I wish you a safe journey home, and I look forward to seeing you in due course. Thank you.